Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, so we'll be going over the masala of zakat and some of the rulings related to zakat. So we don't have much time before Salatul Isha in the masjid, so I'm going to quickly go through this as quick as I can. So just to jump right into it, what is zakat? So linguistically, zakat, it means purity, praise, growth, blessing. In Islamic law, the definition is a little bit more unique. It's a little bit more technical. So the technical definition in Islamic law is هي تمليك بعض مال جزما عينه الشارع لفقير مسلم لله تعالى. To give a fixed amount of specified wealth to a needy Muslim for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Where is zakat established? Zakat is established in the Quran. وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. This is a verse that throughout the Quran we come across, which translates to and establish prayer and give zakat. In the Sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, أن الله قد افترض عليهم صدقة في أموالهم تؤخذ من أغنيائهم فترد في فقرائهم. Allah has made it obligatory for them to pay zakat upon their assets, and it is to be taken from the wealthy amongst them and given to the poor amongst them. Why do we need to give zakat? It's a command of Allah. It purifies the soul from greed, and it purifies wealth from impurity. It promotes circulation of wealth. It's the right of the needy person. It bridges the gap between the affluent and the needy. It reduces inequality in amount of wealth between the rich and the destitute. There are many virtues and admonitions in relation to zakat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and those who hoard in surah number 9, verses 34 and 35, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, and those who hoard gold and silver and spend it not in the way of Allah, give them tidings of a painful punishment, the day when it will be heated in the fire of hell, and seared therewith will be their foreheads, their flanks, and their backs. It will be said, this is what you hoarded for yourself, so taste what you used to hoard. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in surah number 2, verse number 274, those who spend their wealth in Allah's way by night and by day, secretly and publicly, they will have their reward with Allah Azza wa Jal. No fear will there be concerning them, nor will they grieve. In surah number 2, verse number 276, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroys interest and gives increase for charities, and Allah does not like every sinning disbeliever. Now, conditions for zakat. Upon whom is zakat fard? Number 1, Muslim. The person has to be Muslim, which means that the non-Muslim is not obligated to pay zakat, right? The non-Muslim is not obligated to pay zakat. Another condition is that the person upon whom zakat is incumbent on should be an adult, right? It should be an adult, which means and disqualifies anyone that has not reached the age of bulugh, has not reached the age of maturity. Number 3, the person has to be a sane person. Again, this disqualifies those who don't have sound capacity, sound mental capacity. Number 4, that person must be an owner and possessor of wealth which is equivalent to nisab. I'm going to explain what is nisab. And the 5th condition is owning nisab amount for 1 lunar year. So we have to own the nisab amount for 1 lunar year. Now, what is the nisab? The nisab in gold and silver. So the nisab in gold is 87.48 grams, or its equivalent in cash. That is the nisab of gold, which works out to be approximately $4,500, $5,000 approximately. We would need to look at current gold prices. So, for example, if we have this nisab amount, which is 87.48 grams of gold or its equivalent in cash, just multiply the dollar amount per gram, and you will have your nisab amount in dollar currency. You will have your nisab amount in dollar currency. If that amount was with you for 1 lunar year, right? That nisab amount has been with you for 1 lunar year, then zakat becomes fard upon that individual. Okay. Now, the cycle of calculating zakat, the day you own the nisab amount after deducting liabilities, right? That pencil this Islamic date in your diary. If your Islamic date is other than Ramadan and you want to give zakat in Ramadan, then just pay zakat, which is for 5-6 months, calculate it, pay it for 5-6 months, and then when Ramadan comes again, then pay it again. Then pay it again, so that your zakat maturity date is in the month of Ramadan. That's the best time to remember the time of giving and charity. Okay, the cycle of calculating zakat. Number 2, it makes no difference whether the wealth increases or decreases during the course of the year. I mean, this is a misconception. People think, or they assume that 1 year has to pass on every single dollar. I mean, first of all, that's not even possible to do. It's not possible for 1 year to lapse on every single dollar. How is one going to even keep track of a year passing on every single dollar that's in the account? It's not possible. So it makes no difference whether the wealth increases or decreases during the course of the year. What matters is that are you in possession of the nisab amount, which I have just explained. Number 3, 1 lunar year later, if you possess the current nisab amount after deducting liabilities on that very same Islamic date, you must pay 2.5% on your wealth as zakat. This process will continue unless you have wealth equaling less than the nisab amount, number 1. And number 2, all of one's wealth is lost. Now, what are zakatable assets? You have gold, silver, cash, business stock, agricultural produce, animals and livestock. Agricultural produce and animals and livestock, this really doesn't apply to us. So we'll stick with gold and silver, cash, and business stock. Now, what are non-zakatable items? Non-zakatable items such as jewelry besides gold and silver. So if a person is in possession of gold and silver jewelry, that is going to be zakatable according to various hadith. Cars and vehicles, these are non-zakatable. Properties are non-zakatable. Properties on lease, these two are non-zakatable. Electronic appliances, no zakat. Household appliances, no zakat. What is zakatable? Gold and silver for personal use. White gold, this is obviously based on gold content. The majority of white gold is pure gold. I think it's 70% gold. Gold plated, there's no zakat on it. Cash in hand, yes, there's zakatable. Cash in the bank, zakatable. Coins, zakatable. Notes, zakatable. Different currencies, all of it is zakatable. Stocks, zakatable. Now, zakat on business stock. Commodities refer to those items purchased with the intention of resale. Okay, so commodities refer to those items purchased with the intention of resale. That would be subject to zakat. Zakat is compulsory on one's business stocks. Zakat will be calculated according to the retail price of the goods. Zakat will be calculated according to the retail price of the goods. Zakat is not compulsory on real estate purchased with the intention to lease out. However, zakat would be compulsory if real estate is purchased solely for the purpose of selling it or flipping the house. One will add the value of gold, silver, cash, and the total value of goods and give 2.5% of zakat. So gold, silver, cash, and the total value of whatever commodities a person has for business, all of that will be calculated together, multiply 0.025, and you have your zakat amount. Business, if there's a partnership, obviously every partner is responsible to dispense his or her zakat of whatever percentage share they have or they possess. Valuating business stock. This is a question that is often asked by businessmen. We have to evaluate the finishing goods at sale price, right? Valuating finished goods at sale price. Unfinished goods will be valuated within the market price. Now, some other common questions related to zakat. Insurance premiums, these are not zakatable. Another thing that people ask about is tax refund. If it has not yet come in your possession, that too is not going to be zakatable. Once you have it in your possession in check form, then yes, that is going to be zakatable. Okay, debts. Another question that is often asked. What is debts that are receivable? So there is something that is called a strong debt arising from forwarding loans or outstanding invoices. So the ruling is that the creditor must pay zakat on the amount that he has lent. And it is best to add strong debt receivables to one's total assets and discharge zakat on a yearly basis. Debts receivables. This is strong debt. What is considered a weak debt? So weak debt this refers to receivables arising without an exchange of tangible goods. For example, employees' unpaid wages. That's not subject to zakat. Unpaid rental for landlord, not subject to zakat. Outstanding mahar, right? A man and a woman get married, mahar becomes wajib, but the mahar has not yet been paid. Okay? That amount is not subject to zakat. Outstanding bequest payment, not subject to zakat. So the ruling is zakat will not be compulsory on a weak debt receivable until and unless one gets receipt of the asset. Zakat is not compulsory on such a debt for the previous years. It was outstanding as well, just to answer any questions. Bad debt. There's something called bad debts. So there's two situations over here. There's two situations. One is that the debtor acknowledges existence of the debt. If the debtor, whether solvent or insolvent, acknowledges existence of the debt, then the debt is not excluded from the creditor's zakat liability. However, if a creditor is unable to release his debt from his debtor, despite his acknowledgement, it is not liable to zakat. Number two, the debtor denies existence of debt. So if the debtor denies the existence of the debt and it also can't be established, then it is not subject to zakat. Now, debt liabilities. There's something called short-term liabilities which needs to be paid within 1 year. So the total amount of short-term liabilities will always be deducted when calculating one's zakatable assets. Long-term, span over a number of years, the amount one needs to pay in the course of 1 year will be subtracted from one's gross assets. So these will be considered as liabilities. So debt liabilities, debts are deductible from your zakatable total if they are to be repaid in full within the next 12 months, right? So you have tax bill, property taxes, right? This is something that we need to pay every year, right? We have property taxes, so that can be deductible. That can be deducted. That is considered liability. Debts which don't have to be paid in the next 12 months are not deductible. So let's say a person has a mortgage for 15 years, for 30 years. So obviously, 1 year of liabilities can be subtracted, but to take the entire amount, that's not permissible, right? Otherwise, no one is going to pay zakat. No one is going to pay zakat. Everyone who owns a house is never going to pay zakat if we take, the person's mortgage for the next, 15, 30 years, whatever it may be. So debts which don't have to be paid in the next 12 months are not zakatable, just to reiterate. If debts are payable by installments, then 12 months debt is deductible. Now, Deductible liabilities, outstanding, so basic living expenses which have not yet been paid, for example, utility bill. This is a deductible liability. Goods purchased on credit. So you have taken receipt of goods, but you have not yet paid for them, but you fully intend to pay it. This is considered a debt. So this is deductible liabilities. Outstanding salaries, payable service fees. These are all liabilities. They can be deducted from zakatable assets. Unpaid dowry to one's wife, assuming one intends to pay this during the year, then it too can be deducted. Personal loans, that which needs to be repaid within a year, that is deductible. Commercial loans, the entire loan cannot be deducted. Against assets, only 1 year's payments can be deducted. Okay, so zakat on shares, another common question. You have shares. If shares are purchased to resell, so the entire holding is subject to zakat plus any dividends that are received. Shares purchased to hold as an investment and generate dividends, zakat will be levied on dividends, number one. Number two, percentage of zakatable assets of business. So these are the two conditions for purchase to hold as an investment and generate dividends. Business assets, you have fixed assets such as machinery, buildings, furniture, not zakatable. Current assets, cash, stock in trade, receivables, these are all zakatable. All right. Pension schemes. This is another common question that we have. Pension schemes. So in pension schemes, any amount that we contribute voluntarily, that is going to be subject to zakat. That is going to be subject to zakat. So if a person is involved in a pension scheme, what you will do is find out what amount is in the pension, subtract penalties, taxes, everything, pay zakat on the remainder. This will be done every single year. So if a person has a 401k, right, let's say that a person has 100,000 in his 401k. Now that 100,000 is zakatable, right? He has voluntarily contributed into this 401k. Now what he will do is he's going to subtract all liabilities. He will subtract all liabilities. So he will assume that I'm going to take out this amount and I'm going to be hit with different types of penalties and taxes. So let's say he's hit with approximately 20,000 in penalties and taxes. So he will give zakat on 80,000. He's not going to give zakat on 100,000. Okay, so this is pension schemes or 401k. The Roth IRA, same concept, same thing will be done. So after penalties, fees, and everything, you will subtract that and give zakat on the remainder. Okay. Right. Agricultural produce, this is also mentioned in the books. I mean, we're not in a situation where people are living off their land. You know, we go to the grocery, we go to the supermarket and take care of our needs. But just to say a few things related to agricultural produce, zakat for agricultural produce, this is known as ushar. It is known as ushar. What is subject to ushar? Ushar means tenth. Ushar means tenth. So fruits, vegetables, all produce, they're all levied with an ushar payment. So wheat, barley, sugar beet, oilseed, potatoes, peas, field beans, corn, other grains, these are all going to be subject to ushar. Okay, especially when they are for resale, when you're growing them for the purpose of selling them forward. Trees, grass, weed, and other similar undesirable produce are not subject to ushar. The produce of any cultivated land, this will be subject to ushar. Now, how much should be given? If artificial methods of irrigation are employed, such as sprinklers, applicators such as porous tubing, perforated pipes, and other methods, one is going to be 5% of the total value of the crop. If the land was irrigated solely by rainfall, 10% of the total value of the crop must be dispensed. If there's a combination of natural and artificial methods, the more frequent method is going to be given consideration. When is ushur paid? At the time of harvest. So there is no condition of a year. So one will have to give an ushur payment regardless of the quantity or quality of the crop. Now, ushur on agricultural produce, is ownership of the land necessary? It's not necessary to own the cultivated land. Leased, borrowed, as well as land under endowment waqf will be subject to ushur if it was cultivated and crops were produced. Does a lunar year have to pass? No, it's not necessary for a lunar year to pass on agricultural produce. Cash can be, if a person doesn't want to give crops as zakat, it can be given. But in lieu of crops, can he give cash? Absolutely. It is permissible to pay the value in cash. Few more points related to agricultural produce. What about homegrown produce? We have some vegetables, tomatoes, potatoes, cilantro, these kind of things, mint growing in our backyard. It's not levied on that because this is for personal use. Who should be given ushur payments? Ushur will be dispensed to the same recipients as zakat. Will debt absolve one from ushur? So despite debt, one will have to give ushur. That's a whole different ballgame. Okay, so zakat on livestock. You don't have livestock, so I'm just going to omit that. Paying zakat. One should not delay in paying zakat. There are conditions, however, when paying zakat. One is intention. So intention must be made at the time of giving zakat to a qualifying recipient or to one's proxy agent, or at the time of separating zakat from one's total asset. So this should be done. We should separate our zakat money from our total assets. Paying on behalf of the spouse and children. This is another commonly asked question. It's permissible to discharge someone else's zakat from one's own wealth on condition that one has approval and acknowledgement from the other party. Okay, so we need permission from the spouse that, okay, I'm taking care of your zakat. I am taking care of your zakat. So zakat on jewelry, this is something I am taking care of. This is a happy moment for one spouse that the zakat is being taken care of by the husband. All right. Another concept and another condition in zakat is tamlik, which means transferal of ownership. So zakat will only be considered to be paid when tamlik is found, right? So what is tamlik? Tamlik means the transfer of ownership from the zakat payer to a needy person. So tamlik will only take place with the following conditions. Number one, the transfer must be the zakat payer or his or her proxy agent. The transferee or recipient must be a natural living person entitled to receive zakat and not a legal entity. Number three, the transfer must not be remuneration or consideration for any kind of services that were rendered. Okay, the transferee recipient must acquire possession and become owner of the funds unconditionally. Remember this, unconditionally. The recipient must acquire possession and become owner of those funds. Now, who are the recipients? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ الْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُم وَفِي الرِّقَابِ وَالْغَارِمِينَ وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ فَرِيضَةً مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. That zakat payments are only for the needy and for the impoverished and for those employed to collect zakat and for bringing hearts together for Islam and for freeing captives or slaves, and for those in debt, and for the cause of Allah, and for the stranded traveler, an obligation which has been imposed by Allah, and Allah is knowing and wise. So the poor and needy, this is the first category, those who do not own any zakatable assets, nor surplus assets beyond their personal assets that equal the nisab. This is poor and needy. Fi sabilillah, those in the path of Allah, those mujahideen who are needy. Debtors, those individuals whose liabilities exceed their zakatable and surplus assets. Travelers, those who are in a desperate situation and have no access to their personal money. Mu'allafati qulub, those non-Muslims or Muslims whose hearts are drawn near to Islam by giving them a sum of money, and zakat collectors, those zakat collectors who are commissioned by the government to collect zakat funds on behalf of the poor. This doesn't exist now, right? This doesn't exist. So zakat collectors, they have to be commissioned by an Islamic government to collect zakat for them to be eligible to receive zakat. Those who can't take zakat, general welfare projects, hospitals, madrasas, construction projects for mosques, hospitals, the descendants of Abbas, radiallahu anhu, Harith, Ja'far and Aqil, ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, the rich person, one's wife or husband, one's parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, ascendants, one's children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, descendants, a non-Muslim, employees as remuneration, prisoners. These categories cannot receive zakat. They cannot receive zakat. They cannot use it for themselves. Zakat will not stand as fulfilled. So when we give it to the masjid, it's the masjid's job to make sure that that money is going to the right categories. When we give to the hospital, hospitals need to make sure that that money is going to the right people, people who fall within the categories that I have just explained. And this concludes our brief take on zakat. Hopefully this was beneficial. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay. Are there any questions? I'll wait for about 30 seconds. Okay, inshallah. So if there are any questions, then everyone knows how to get in touch with me. Just send me your questions and I will respond to them. Jazakumullah khairan. To everyone who stopped by, barakallahu feekum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our knowledge to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world and the hereafter. Assalamu alaikum.